But I just want to start before we get the live demonstration going with the cash flow. I'd like to visit the question and the big question of why. Why should we even prepare a cash flow forecast? And this is the underlying concept that most business owners miss. And this is, I really want you to grab hold of this. It's not the cash flow that's the key. It's the additional knowledge that the cash flow provides to the business owner that helps clear uncertainty, creates clarity, and that's the true value. Remember we talked about a clarity plan. Well, clarity in cash flows are critical because uncertainty breeds fear. But as we can see from this slide here, the opposite is also true. A clearer mind and increased knowledge brings with it better decision making and a reduction in fear that engulfs so many business owners. I may have heard Michael, I'm not sure if you said this on one of the previous webinars we've done or just other sessions we've done, but I've heard him say many, many times, the majority of business owners fly blind. Would you drive with a blindfold on? Well, of course you wouldn't. No one can drive with a blindfold on. So why on earth do we operate businesses with a blindfold on? Why don't we look at our cash flows? And sadly, the majority of businesses don't have cash flows. So, is it any wonder really when we hear the stats about the proportion of businesses that fail in the first 5 years? It's so shockingly high, and it's a worry. And if they're operating their business with a blindfold on, well, they're making it harder for themselves. Now, I'm not going to pretend that cash flow forecast is the silver bullet. It's not the panacea that solves all problems. But what it does, it gives greater knowledge and information, and that creates better decision making. And that's what we're after here as business owners, better decision making. So what we're going to do here is jump into a live demonstration. I'll just bring up the new screen of that. And this live demonstration will show exactly a scenario that we've been working through recently. Now, one thing just to recap, I think it was Nicole last week, talked about templates for business plans. Same thing here in terms of templates for cash flows. There is no right, there is no wrong template. This is just one version that we've used and seen used. And so therefore, like the business plan, whilst we have our preferred templates to use for our own reasons where we find clarity and simplicity to be really important, we do believe in that easy to understand advice that works motto. It's not the template that's the key. It's the conversation and the thinking that goes behind the template that is the key. So it's the actions, it's the outcomes, it's the thinking, it's the mentality. All that adds so much weight to what you're going to get out of a cash flow forecast. Just putting numbers on a page is ticking a box. The reality is it's the decisions, the thinking, and the process that you go through that means so much. So we've just got some numbers there for a cash flow forecast, which is a month-by-month scenario. And you'll see this is a business we've put together, which has income, you see at the top there. We can work through cost of sales, overhead costs. We work through rents, wages. We also work importantly from cash. So that's all the profit and loss side of things. But we also look from a cash flow point of view. Well, what about tax office payments? What about loan payments? What about payments to the owners? That's money coming out of the business, these cash flows. So effectively, a cash flow, we'll talk about any cash that goes in or out of the business. So it may be the shareholder hat that is funding the business, or the shareholder hat that is taking money out of the business. That's part of the cash flow. So we can see how that works. But what I want to show really is how powerful it can be with your decision making if you use some thinking around it. So let's jump in here, scenario planner. So that's our base scenario. Our base scenario, as we see it, is where I am right now, based upon all the information that I have available to me at this time. A scenario planner. So let's talk about some real life examples. And what we're showing here is actually elements of what's been going on over the last 4 months with businesses challenged by COVID-19. And if we look at this is just a typical example of someone that's been hit at the moment, and look, things may have happened again with announcements this week, that let's say they dropped 10% of sales, and by the same token, if you're going to drop 10% of sales, you'll also have a 10% reduction in the cost of sales. And simply lose 10% there, lose 10% of sales. We look at our graph, and what we can see is that all of a sudden, the profitability for the year drops by 80% in this particular case. From 50, the cash flow position goes right back to 10. Now, for a business owner, that can be devastating. Imagine if you didn't have the 50 for a start. How are you talking to banks? How are you dealing with suppliers over this time? But the power of that is right here. If we know that a 10% reduction in sales will mean a $40,000 reduction in our cash position, let's go and make some decisions. We're armed with information. Let's go and find out what's the case. Above the line, below the line approach. We can have excuses, we can deny it's going to happen, or we can take ownership for what happens going ahead. So let's just go back to this scenario planner. I just want to run through a couple of things that people and clients have done, and it's actually changed their scenarios. So one part is renegotiating the way they work with their employees and the like. Let's say, for example, we realize that our sales is going to be down by 10%. So we restructure our rosters, renegotiate the hours everyone's working for, and we're able to reduce our cost of sales for our employees by 15% across the board. So I'll just plonk that in there. And that also extends to things like superannuation, work cover, payroll tax, if that's a cost as well for the business. Let's do that. Also, what we've seen a lot of recently is businesses in these scenarios either reconstructing their structure, their footprint, or renegotiating the rent. So let's work on a rent basis and let's reduce the rent because of the situation by, let's say, 30%. They bring their rent down by 30%. And here's one of the tricks. Here's one of the big tricks. It's easy to cut. But what about sometimes we need to invest in the business? So in this case, and I'll just use an actual real life scenario here. We had one client that doubled their marketing spend. Doubled. So the 100% increase on their marketing spend. And the reason they did that was because they're in a competitive market. They knew there was buyers out there, but they needed a greater percentage of the buyers than they'd ever had before. So they marketed twice as hard. The other thing that a couple had to do, which, let's put my hands up, that was actually great for us, was they had to spend time working on their business with a coach, an accountant, forecast, all that sort of thing. And there was a number of clients who spent a couple of $1,000. I'll just put an extra $2,000 in there in cost. Now, that's hard to cop because spending extra money when times are tough is really, really challenging and challenges the normal mindset of business owners. Normally, it's how can I reduce costs? But sometimes I need to invest in myself, my team, my business. So put that through there. The actions of actually creating some business strategies and plans and the additional advertising and marketing costs actually brings the loss of sales down. So if we look at now the sales are reduced to, say, 6% rather than 10%. So they're still going down, but the loss is less. And again, the stock on cost of sales, again, reduces by the same. And we go there. Let's now have a look at what scenario summary does. And you'll see the line. It literally moves back up. It doesn't reach the same heights that it was prior to the 10% reduction in sales. It doesn't reach the same heights as it was, in this case, pre-COVID-19. But what it does is it brings the business back with a much, much healthier position. Now, that's not the cash flow itself that's doing it. The cash flow is providing the information, it's providing the source data, it's providing knowledge. It's the action, I keep talking about action, it's the action and then the accountability to actually follow through on those actions that moves that line up so much in such a short time, just by keeping consistent focus on the business. Now, we've also got in here in our live demo, and we often use it. I highly recommend, if you want to truly know about your cash flow position, go for a weekly planner, not monthly. And I want to just move to this tab here in particular. And whilst it has the same functionality for mindset, so you're still going fundamentally the same process as the monthly planner, you make decisions, you know what cash flow is happening. But the thing I want to highlight from the graph, and you can see on the screen, is that weekly, you can truly learn how your cash flow cycle works. You'll see here, if you look through this graph, often month to month, the end is a reasonable cash position. It keeps coming back up to these little peaks. But just take a look at some of the troughs within the month. So if this is your cash cycle in your business and you don't know this information, if you think month to month we're going okay, but hang on, halfway through the month, something's not right. There was a client many years ago who said, some days I feel like a king, other days I feel like the court jester. And that's what's happening here. But if you know about this and you know this information, well, you can control it. But if you don't, well, is it any wonder you're having sleepless nights about cash and cash flow? So to truly understand your cash flow cycle, I just can't stress enough, and Michael's going to talk about this shortly, how important 1 hour per week is to teach you so much and actually take control of your cash flow, give you back power to make decisions rather than feeling almost frozen by the lack of clarity and fear that comes with driving your business with that blindfold on.